Donald Trump has got him. Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, has been abducted by the United States in a seemingly very successful special military operation that was conducted in the early hours of the morning this morning in the capital of Venezuela, Caracas. So, what does all of this mean for the Russo-Ukrainian war and the future of Ukraine? Privit, and greetings from Odessa here in the shores of the Black Sea. And we are in the midst of the Russo-Ukrainian war, going into the fourth year of the extended invasion. And this morning, Donald Trump managed to capture the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, and they were in the process of being removed from the country, presumably to the United States. And this will presumably lead to regime change in Venezuela and the installation of a pro-United States government. Donald Trump has been very open about the fact that he wants to get his hands on Venezuelan oil. Venezuela is a significant oil producing nation, and this will have significant consequences for Russia in particular and its war here in Ukraine. The first big minus for Russia is that they have already lost an ally in Maduro, and this is a significant chink in the armor of, we'll say, an anti-Western alliance or an axis of authoritarianism, since Maduro was also a dictator who did not legitimately win, by all accounts, the last presidential elections in Venezuela. In any case, he was allied with Vladimir Putin, along with, we'll say, the Iranian government, which now sees significant protests in their country. We've got North Korea, we've got China, and this is one member of the axis of authoritarianism, along with Bashar al-Assad, who lost power around a year ago in Syria, that has bitten the dust. So this is, at least on a moral and psychological level, a blow for Russian imperialism and its influence around the world. Number two, and more importantly, Venezuela, under a pro-US government, would presumably also ratchet up the production of oil. And this, in the short to medium term, will have a significant impact on Russia's ability to finance its war against Ukraine, because Venezuela, pumping out more and more oil is going to lower the price of oil. Also, Venezuela is a strong competitor for Russian petroleum. So in general, we could see the oil price in the short run lose a few extra dollars, but over the medium term, that could be in excess of $10 per barrel. And with oil prices already pretty low and well below what Russia needs to break even on its budget in terms of the revenues to get in, this is another blow to Russia's ability to keep the war going. It will not mean that the Russian economy will collapse in the short run. However, it is another pressure point that Russia is going to have to face, because they already give big discounts on the sale of their oil products due to the sanctions, and the oil price dropping even further will mean that they will have lower revenues. They don't have much ability to do anything about that. Even if OPEC eventually cuts supply, Russia presumably won't be doing so, because they really need every single ruble they can get at the moment, any dollar cent that they can get from selling their oil products. So this is a significant issue for Russia. It means that going forward they will have less revenue. That means less money to spend on materiel for the war, less money to keep the state functioning in Russia, and presumably avoiding some sort of black swan event in Russia, either a palace coup or a popular uprising, and their ability to actually pay soldiers, which is the principal way that they get Russians to sign up to fight and die in Ukraine for Putin's imperial glory. That is going to become more and more difficult. It is already showing many cracks in their ability to recruit soldiers in the last few months. Some regions of Russia have announced that they will not pay the special additional bonus for signing up in their region, and the Ukrainian military has said that for the first time in the last 3 years, Russia is now recruiting less soldiers than they lose on the front line. So this is going to be a significant issue if they cannot pay the soldiers enough to get them to sign up. That would mean that Russia would start to have less and less manpower, less and less materiel than they would have otherwise, and their economy will decline even quicker. So all this is pretty bad for Vladimir Putin. It is not a silver bullet for Ukraine, however. It does not mean that Russia will collapse next week, most likely. However, it does mean that Russia's ability to finance the war and conduct it with any realistic chance of achieving their strategic objectives has just been dealt another further blow. And it does not look good for Russia as we go into 2026, especially if we look at that on the horizon of having to conduct the war until at least now 2028, because Ukraine will have the war. It will have war, unfortunately, most likely, but it will have the financing to conduct its defense for another 2 years or so. So unless there is a black swan event on the Ukrainian side that leads to a collapse of the government or the military, then it is most likely that Russia is in a position where they're going to be running out of financing, possibly before Ukraine does. So all this is very good news if you're sitting here in Odessa this morning. Mightn't be how we would like to see international relations conducted, especially by the US, with them basically abducting the leader of a country that they don't get along with. However, the consequences are, on the whole, quite negative for Russia, and, as you'd expect, quite positive for Ukraine. So, drop your comments down below what you think of the whole event. This morning, it does seem to indicate a stronger alignment to Trump's desire to return to imperialism, especially with the Monroe Doctrine, which is that he should be basically able to dominate everything in the Western Hemisphere. This does play a little bit, I guess, as a counterpoint to it all being bad for Russia, that Donald Trump definitely sees the world in terms of spheres of influence. However, that is not going to outdo the cost to Russia for losing a regional ally who's also helping with some of the sanctions invasion, and most importantly, what it's going to do to global oil prices. Donald Trump has probably indirectly and unintentionally helped Ukraine a lot in this regard, because now we should be seeing the oil price drop further. So anyways, down below, drop your comments, let me know what you think. And if you are planning to come here to Ukraine, then I have my guide, the Insider's Guide for coming to Ukraine during the war. And there you'll have not just the logistical information and the background to coming here to Ukraine, how to stay safe as possible. Also my hospitality guide for cities like here in Odessa, Kyiv, Lviv, Chernovtsi, and Uzhhorod. And if you are coming here, I wish you a safe and pleasant journey and stay in spite of everything that Russia is trying to do to the people of Ukraine. So one step closer to victory from Ukraine's point of view, and one step closer to defeat from the Russian perspective. Slava Ukraini, do peremоги!